Yeah, so yes, I'm really
As the
pleased
meeting is being recorded.
that there is an organization like the Urban Ecology Center. I understand that people come from various places to see how this is done. And one of the most, I think, challenging things for our species is to do whatever we can to help us feel the connection to the land. It's the idea that if you feel connected to it and you love it, you're naturally going to want to protect it. So instead of having like a lot of laws and rules about how a mother should take care of a baby, there's that natural love for the baby that is going to naturally want to protect it and care for it and see that it turns out the best. That's the premise in ecopsychology. So a bit about my background. Well, first of all, I want to say that what I have been working on for several years, and I'll tell you how this came about, is what is the spirit in the land here in the upper Midwest. There's a real power in the land here and what many people think of as flyover country, but that's what I will be developing here in my talk with a focus on Atwater Park. So I established my connection to the land by growing up on a small dairy farm in Kewaunee County. Many people don't seem to know where it is. It's the county beneath Door County. So dead end road. And we had 25 cows. That was back in the 1950s. And now we have two farms in the county with 10,000 cows. Each of those farms have replaced 400 family farms like I grew up on. And of course, most of the workers are immigrants, a certain number of illegal immigrants. So if they deport all of the immigrants, legal and illegal, the Wisconsin economy would collapse. And because these farms are so huge, the manure and the drainage and the seepage into the aquifers has contaminated, I think, over 30% of the aquifers in Kewaunee County with bovine bacteria and viruses and things like that, plus a lot of nitrates. So this is a quote that I used in my first volume of the Dairy Farmer's Guide to the Universe, subtitled Jung, Hermes, and Ecopsychology. Quote from Jung. He said, "We keep forgetting that we are primates, and we have to make allowances for these primitive layers in our psyche. The farmer is still closer to these layers. In tilling the earth, he moves around within a very narrow radius, but he moves on his own land. And it's not as much that it's your own land, but just being on that land through all the seasons and with the animals and everything. That kind of rooted connection, that's more like what our inheritance has been as tribal peoples." So I established a deep connection with the cows and the pigs and the chickens. And then through the 4-H club projects, I knew the names of all the wildflowers and the songbirds and the trees. And the last 4-H project I took was insects. So I had decided by the 8th grade, if I was smart enough, I wanted to be a research entomologist. And there's me at the Kewaunee County Science Fair, year I graduated from high school, which was in 1962. I went out to, I established a real sensitivity to place and culture and geography, geology, and well, because I was born in Southern California. I was born in Long Beach. My mother was literally a Rosie the Riveter. She was helping to build the B-17 Flying Fortress bombers in Long Beach, California, the big Douglas aircraft factory. So I lived in Anaheim first 6 years of my life. And then in 1950, my parents moved to my mom's home farm, the one that was on that picture I showed you before in the book. to the one-room country school with the same teacher that my mom had. And it was a total culture shock to me, from a city school and living surrounded by orange groves to end of winter in Wisconsin. And a lot of these kids were Belgians and they couldn't make the TH sound. So it was always D's and dem and does and so on. And I thought, what the heck have my parents moved me into? But it was quite a unique experience. And that's where I, like I said, in that rural area, formed my sense of place. And then after I got my master's degree in economic entomology, which is basically like spray and count to control insects, I'd read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, the year I graduated from high school in 1962. Didn't want to be a spray jockey, so went out to Berkeley, fall of 1967. 1968 was my first full year in Berkeley. And all I'll say is I didn't miss much. I was in all the anti-war protests and so on. And this is what I looked like about 1968, 69, somewhere in there. It was an amazing time to be in Berkeley. And my one-liner is how I got from being an insect pathologist to being a Jungian analyst was by being in Berkeley in the late 60s. So I had a California girlfriend and we traveled all the blue highways and camped and everything. Just loved it. But then it was in the early 70s, I was at a garden party with some lawyers. A good friend of mine was in law school, and one of the law students there was the son of Henry Royce. He's the guy, congressman from Milwaukee, who was instrumental in setting up the Ice Age Trail. So I'm talking to Royce's son, and he said, "You miss Wisconsin, don't you?" And I was kind of shocked. And I thought about it and I thought, my God, I felt more connected to the land and with nature in our farm woodlot than hiking the backpacking freeways in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I mean, the Sierras. Sierra Nevada, I think that was more southern, but maybe that's on the border, come to think of it. So that's the first time I began to think about something of the Midwest, and it's the land here. Because, like I said, it took me to the 8th grade in Wisconsin, so I decided, well, maybe Wisconsin is as good as California. So what happened is in my last year of training, I finished in Zurich, went on to train at the original Jung Institute in Zurich. It's actually Kusnacht, just south of the city of Zurich. And I had a lot of big dreams my last year of training. I mean, really big dreams. And I'll share one of those, my Sacred Meadow dream. And that is a setup to a 1992 article in Parade magazine where Carl Sagan, as co-chair of religion and science for the environment, said in that quote put out by that group, efforts to safeguard and cherish the environment need to be infused with a vision of the sacred. Well, how do you do that for modern men and women? So Americans move a lot, and I hope to give an example of how you can use a big dream to connect you to sense of place and various other things we can do to help people connect as quickly as possible to whatever place they move into. So this is a quote from one of my favorite books on ecopsychology and psychology of the environment by Deborah Dunan Winter, called Ecological Psychology, Healing the Split Between Planet and the Self. And she says, our environmental problems are not so much a crisis of technology as a crisis of insight. And our sense of self changes when, quote, when we experience embeddedness in an emotionally meaningful way, end of quote. So ecopsychologists recognize the importance of non-cognitive direct experiencing of nature to establish a deeper spiritual understanding and connection to it. We need direct experiences to be cognizant of our larger ecological selves. And Winter notes that some of our problems quote, stem from our limited experiences of the complexity, beauty, magic, and awesome power of the natural world. And I hope to develop some sense of that with Atwater Park. So this was my sacred meadow dream that I had in that last year of training, and this set me up for all this work on Jungian ecopsychology. So it was a single image dream of like a typical Wisconsin meadow or pasture scene. It didn't look, I had to get this off the internet, but it was a much smaller area, like a small field of alfalfa with some, of course, had to be some insects flying above the alfalfa, gently rolling topography, trees on the horizon, blue sky, puffy white clouds, typical summer day. Just a pretty plain scene, but it is the most beautiful landscape I have ever seen because every atom in that image had an inner light. It was what Jungians call a numinous or a big dream or a sacred dream. And I maintain that the human psyche is not capable of producing a more sacred image than that. No, a Native American or whatever could not have even a more sacred dream. So how do you work with that? That's what I'll be talking about today. So I equated to, like I said, I'd seen some of the most beautiful scenery in the world, Yosemite, Swiss Alps, Canadian Rockies, and so on, but never anything as beautiful as that Wisconsin meadow. So I think of that dream as it's what my soul would look like if it were a landscape. And that is what a lot of Native Americans did, like the Sioux Indians, with the vision quest when a boy got to be an adolescent, put up on the hill, as they call it, 4 days and nights without food and water, praying for a vision. So you stress the psyche to the max, hoping that you will get an image of your essence. That's what a spirit animal is, or a medicine animal. In Christian terms, that would be like a guardian angel, but it's so specific. It'd be like a sitting bull buffalo, or a dancing horse, and so on, or a red cloud, etc. And that is to be your like emotional, spiritual, psychological guide for your life, that spirit animal. It's like if God were to appear in the form of an animal or plant, this is what your particular animal or plant would look like. So for those of you that are familiar with the I Ching, the I Ching as the Chinese call it, I do a lot of teaching in China because I felt a very natural connection. Same connection I immediately felt with Jung when I started reading them. These are the first two hexagrams. There are 64 hexagrams. Hexagrams, combination of yin and yang lines. Hexagram 1 is called the creative. Hexagram 2 is the receptive. So the receptive is to take the inspiration by hexagram 1 and to manifest it in space and time. So the big dream is like hexagram 1. So you just don't go around boasting about a big dream. It's like, okay, that's some essence of you. Now manifest that in your life. So that manifestation then, the first thing I did when we got back to the States is, well, actually wasn't, I finished up in Zurich in 1983. Then 1991, my wife and I did week-long Spirit in the Land, Spirit in Animals, Spirit in People, an interdisciplinary approach to environmental education. So I was working on combining Native American spirituality, science, and Jungian psychology. We did that 2 years in a row, and then 1994, the University Extension asked to do us a program for the teachers. That was a 2-day program, and it got to that point, it was some of the highest reviews of any program they had done. So we knew that there was a place for this. And the talks that I gave there became the genesis of the Dairy Farmer's Guide to the Universe. So the 4 books took me 18 years to write, on and off, mostly off. So Jungian ecopsychology, I cry of Merlin Jung, the prototypical ecopsychologist, Hermes, ecopsychology and complexity theory. I'll be lecturing to the Chinese on that next week. And then the last one, land, weather, seasons, insects, and archetypal view. So that is how the first stage in manifesting that big dream. So ecopsychology then, just to describe that, that began to emerge in the mid-1990s. And it's a study of how our values, our attitudes, our perspectives about the land affect our relationship to the land, and also about ways of deepening our connection to the land. So I want to illustrate today how I did that using Atwater Park here in Milwaukee County in Shorewood. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with Atwater Park. It's this wonderful park beside Lake Michigan. We lived in Madison 25 years before moving to Milwaukee. And Lake Michigan is just another dimension beyond this beautiful Lake Mendota in Madison. So I've been going there for almost since we moved to Milwaukee, several years now. Been taking pictures and so on. And I will be developing a concept by one of my favorite Jungians, James Hillman. The thoughts are presented in a book called The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. And Hillman picked up on the idea, Neoplatonic idea, of Aphrodite as the soul of the world. So Aphrodite is the goddess of sensuality and sexuality and beauty for the Greeks. And Hillman's thrust has been to get therapy and analysis out of the therapist office and out into the world. So instead of the soul just be something that we have within us, no, there's soul in the world as well. So with Aphrodite as the soul of the world becomes something beautiful and fascinating and lures you into a connection with it. Now, when I go to Atwater Park, I always have my camera, and oftentimes there have been people photographing for weddings and this and that, and probably calendars and whatnot. So this is our Milwaukee version of Aphrodite. I was there one morning and this woman was having herself photographed coming out of the lake. So I said, that's Aphrodite emerging from the water, that famous Greek myth. So when I go to Atwater, what I tell myself, if my soul looked like a landscape, this is what it would look like. So then you look at everything very carefully. You look at every little detail, etc. So I am going to set us up a little more with the idea of the Tao here. My favorite book on Taoism is David Hinton's translation of the Tao Te Ching, of Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. And this is a quote from that. This is from a lecture I gave in Chinese, so the only slide I could find had the Chinese translation below it. And Hinton in the glossary said, the philosophy of Tao embodies a cosmology rooted in the most primal and wondrous presence, Earth's mysterious generative force, venerated as the Great Mother. She continuously gives birth to all creation, and like natural processes which she represents, she also takes life and regenerates it in an unending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The awesome generative force appears most explicitly in Lao Tzu's recurring references to the female principle in a variety of manifestations: mother, female, feminine, yielding, choice, source, origin, etc. It is everywhere in the Tao Te Ching, for it is nothing other than the Tao itself. So to really sink into a place like Atwater, that's what the Tao is. So the Tao operates in accordance with the natural order and spontaneous unfolding of events. The Tao is the underlying principle that governs its processes. Taoists seek to align themselves with the natural flow of the universe, understanding that true progress and harmony comes from acting in accordance with the Tao's inherent principles, rather than attempting to force or to control the natural order. This includes concepts like non-interference, spontaneity, and acceptance of the cyclic cycle of change. Now, so there are phases in the Tao, and for those of you that use the Jing, the most one is still with best translation is by Richard Wilhelm, and he used his terms like supreme success, furthers, and perseverance. But a better translation is spring, growth, harvest, and trial. And of course, in a Judeo-Christian tradition, that's makes us think of Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Time to be born, time to die, time to plant, time to uproot, and so on. So what you're trying to do in life, if you use this metaphor, you're trying to find what season you're in, even what day and the hour of the week. In Buddhism, they talk about be here now, be present. While you can use nature as a way to reflect upon and think about, use it as a metaphor for where you are with regard to whatever you're dealing with at the moment. And how to be fully in the moment is what when you use the I Ching, that's all about. So one of the amazing things, with that set up now, we'll get into Atwater. One of the amazing things about Atwater, especially if there's a wind and there's some waves crashing on the shore, you can be there and you have no sense that there's this big metropolitan area around you. You can get totally immersed in it. I've always loved clouds, and with this lake, you have half of your horizon is just flat. So the clouds and their wondrous manifestations. But then as there are clouds, it changes the colors on the water because of the shadows beneath the clouds. And when the wind comes in, the waves and the sounds change, the temperatures and so on. As the seasons go on, the plants and the phenology and so on changes. So just to review it a bit, there's this asphalt trail that goes down to the lake. This is looking toward the north. And at that bend, this is looking toward the south, toward the lake. So I walk that as fast as I can 6 times, and I do the stairs, and that's my exercise there. And to go there in all the weathers and seasons and so on, it's a wondrous thing to be in the city, like I said. So we can think of one season kind of as an analogy to our life. And then the phenology, the sequence of the blooming of the plants, just takes us all the way through the seasons, makes us realize that every plant has its own way of being in the world. And one way I think of it is I think of myself as being, I do have some spirit animals as being a spirit animal, but I think of other people as like being other species in the environment. We are, as humans, are all so different. We're almost like different species if we were in the animal world. So then you go to Atwater, over a period of years, you get a broader perspective of life. It's kind of like seeing your children grow up and then your grandchildren. And no 2 years are the same. And then over the longer period, you get the gradual changes. The lake levels kind of rise and they fall through the years. We see the effects of global warming, the death of the trees from the emerald ash borer, and so on. So to embody my sacred meadow dream, I use all my senses: sight, sound, skin sensation, the feel of the breeze on your body, or the discomfort of the cold wind in winter. But one of the most important things, and I can't convey it with pictures, are scent. It's so powerful and it's so beautiful just to really embody that, to take a deep breath, go sniffing around, and the sense will change as the different flowers come into blossom. And of course, with the lake effect, for scent, um, Arthur Hassler, I met him at a party in Madison. This is the Hassler Limnology Lab on Lake Mendota, University of Wisconsin-Madison, at a party with him, and he told me how he discovered how salmon find their way home. Hassler said, I was walking in the woods one day and I smelled something and it took me right back to my childhood. And he said, I wonder if that's how salmon find their way home. So he did some experiment. He cut some nerves by which the salmon can smell things, and they were clueless. They could not find their way back to their home, a stream, after being in the ocean for years and years. So one of the amazing things about Lake Michigan is it creates its own weather. So you can go there some days and it'll be foggy and you go a few miles inland and it's totally summer. So it is a force of nature, literally. And it moderates the temperatures. So I would want to talk then about the seasons of the soul, these phases of the Tao, if you will, starting off in winter. But first, a quote from Joseph Campbell, or a comment. He said, one of the most universal analogies is that of the seasons to the human life cycle. And Francois Chen, a professor of Chinese art, said this about landscape painting. In paying so much attention to nuances of a landscape going through the change of seasons, the painter is in reality expressing the state of his own soul. So winter in Wisconsin, let's start with that. That's relating to the trial phase in the I Ching. This is an end of November shot. You can barely see some of the snowflakes. They're blurry. And here's a January shot looking up from the beach, with that path going down to the beach. And it's always so amazing to think of how plants, so alive in summer, how do they survive the winter and then come back to life in the spring? So after this long winter and the silence of winter, one of the first signs of spring are the red-winged blackbirds coming back. This is taken in early March, a month before the females arise. And those aren't love songs. They're songs to stake out their territory, to tell the other male blackbirds, this is my spot. So the first plants to show some life are the aspens. They're wind-pollinated flowers because the insects aren't out. So the flowers come out before the leaves. This was taken on April 9th. And then the plants just sort of explode out of the earth as soon as the first signs of winter are over. This is taken on March 30th. And this is what the hillside looks like on May 9th. And I love to see the unfolding of this amazing stuff and this big bud of the sumac, just to see them every day, just open up more and more. All that stuff kind of hidden inside that bud that comes forward. That was taken in early May. And then here's another shot of it, little leaves coming out. Then the black locust puts out its beautiful flowers toward the end of May. And the rose is one of the early and strongly scented plants, that of insect pollinated plants that come out. This is June 4th. And then you can begin to see then after the petals, the seed pods beginning to form. That previous shot was June 14th, and this is on July 7th. Then the daisies, this was on July 7th. So July 7th, and yes, okay, let's just go forward. Then the daisies come out. This was on June 1st. And then here's a little beauty I like, the penstemon, June 21st. And then the hillside, you can see them on the hillside. And then the sumac starts to blossom early July, and the bees just love it. They're just abuzz with bees then. Then in midsummer, my favorite flower, the bee balm or bergamot. The bees just love it. And this is like I said, there's a big patch of that midway down to the lake on the lake side. And there's a bee on the bee balm. There's looking toward the lake. The echinacea come out about the same time, midsummer. And we see the coneflower, the prairie coneflower, emerges about the same time. Just looking up on the hillside, you see how the color on the hillside changes with the phenology of the different flower species that are blossoming. That's on July 25th. And here's on July 30th. Then in August, we have the Canadian goldenrod, and then the bees flock to pollinate that. And that's at the same time that the invasive species, the white snakeroot, pops up. And here are the patches on the hillside at the end of August. And then the bergamot, which is the lower left part, has gone to seed by that time, and you can see the goldenrod. And then by the end of September, the goldenrod has gone to seed, and these beautiful New England asters start to bloom as a sign that summer is coming toward an end. And the evening primrose that started to bloom in midsummer keeps blossoming way into the fall, stacking up the seed pods as time goes on. And here's what the rose looks like in early fall, and then in November. So I always get a slight depression when the plants start to dry up and die off and the growing season comes to an end. All the beauty that they offered us and the scents and the insects around us and so on starts to wither away. But life continues with the seeds that have formed. They will carry on life in the next generation of seeds. So I will close then by circling back to Aphrodite as the soul of the world. Coming back to Hillman. Hillman says, the soul is born in beauty and feeds on beauty, requires beauty for life. Aphrodite is beauty and smiling charm. She enraptures with the magic of an appearance that draws irresistibly. Beauty is divine self-revelation, the manifest anima mundi, or soul of the world, neither transcendent to the manifest or hidden immanent within. Aphrodite's beauty refers to the luster of each particular event, its clarity, its particular brightness, appearance as such, created as they are, in the forms with which they are given. Sense data bear facts. So by trying to see the world then as a follower of Aphrodite, the world becomes sensuous, beautiful, and alive. It shifts from lifeless things to animate subjects, soulful presences that approach from without, liberating soul from the sense of being a totally private inner experience. The appropriate response and a way of generating this perspective is to perceive and react to the world as lover to its beloved, a response with a detailed poetic observation of a lover and not the statistically cold, removed, analytic eye of the scientist. Cosmos for the Greeks referred to the right placing of the multiple things of the world, the ordered arrangement. Soul is intrinsic in the idea of cosmos, not a great emanation of an immortal nature, nor some uber soul, transcendent element, or ground of being, but soul is what emerges in the moment, in the scrupulous animal-like attention to the detail, the elements in the environment. To quote Sendivorius, the greater part of the soul is outside of the body. Remember, Hillman's goal was to try to get us out of soul as just totally within us and feel the world. Jung's main symbol system was alchemy. And many of the alchemists thought that Jesus had saved the microcosm. They were out to re-sanctify the macrocosm. They thought that Christianity has separated us from the world that no longer seemed to be sacred and spirited. So I want to close with a beauty blast then at Atwater. So just look at the images, kind of let them sink in. This is Bootson. He hasn't been that active this year, but in the fall, usually in October, he goes down and he does all these wonderful things in the sand. This is a labyrinth. Then he has people come down to walk the labyrinth. I think one of the, yes, I know that at, is it Versailles? Oh, not Versailles. Some cathedral
Cathedral of Chartres in France.
Chartres, yes. This is on the floor, the Chartres Cathedral. It's built over some ancient sacred. I hate to use the word pagan. It sounds so derogatory. Pre-Christian site. And Kathleen Collison lent me this photo. One of the few days I was at Atwater Park and didn't have my camera. There was a rainbow over the lake. So thank you, Kathleen, for lending this to me. Thank you. And this is my website, blog site, jungianecopsychology.com. And it has a lot of articles on there. I think I have about 35 by now. Started doing this several years ago. My most recent one that's been pretty popular is called David Brooks, Trump, Bob Dylan, and the I Ching. If you scroll down about 5 blogs, you come to the general index, and I have sections on dreams, Jung and the environment, fairy tales and mythology, the I Ching, film, George Floyd, COVID-19, literature, and guns in the American psyche. So that is my presentation, and thank goodness we have some time to get some responses here. And